So let me start introducing myself. My name is Rodrigo de Alvarenga. I'm a founder of a company called HAG. I have done this in 2010, and this company started as a consulting company focusing on finance and strategy due to my previous background in the financial markets, in where I have worked for 21 years, 12 of which as an executive manager or a regional director in charge of corporate banking and middle market divisions, as well as a previous experience as an investment banker and a few other things that I have done there. So this was myself preparing to leave the financial markets for good, pursuing a career as an entrepreneur, mainly as a consultant. What happens at the same time, we founded HAG. We start angel investing in startups in between our first year. We started in 2010, and until 2011, we did 3 investments just to check and to better understand how it would work, as well as to learn from it. The fact that all 3 investments were pre-operational companies. The investment was used to fund basically the proof of concept, and in 3 cases, out of 3 cases, 3 of them failed. So starting with this experience, I decided to either stop doing it or to learn how to do it properly. And despite my background in finance and the financial markets, I learned myself. It was a very hard learning, I would say, that investing in newborn companies, it's a completely different animal. And so I began to invest my time, effort, and also money into learning how to become an angel investor. From 2011 on, we've been doing this since then in various different ways. First thing I did was start talking to friends elsewhere, not just in Brazil, but also abroad, trying to talk to people who had experience. So that led me to travel around different ecosystems in the world, starting with US and Europe, and then a few other places later on, to figure out how this could be done, not just in Brazil, but with startups based here as well as elsewhere. From 2011 until 2013, basically, I kept doing a few investments to test and to learn from real experience instead of just listening to people or reading. And but we applied the concepts we've learned throughout all this journey. In 2013, I decided to leave the financial markets for good and dedicate myself entirely to what we were doing. And at the same time, we start working in partnership with some institutions in US at first in order to bring them into Brazil. And we did it with Startup Grind, which is the largest network of independent network of entrepreneurs in the world. And later on, we did the same with Founder Institute. So I was responsible for bringing them into Brazil together with a few other people, so we could establish here initiatives that were much more mature than what we had in Brazil, as well as connecting our local ecosystem internationally. And not just thinking about startups in the sense of founding companies, but as well as, looking for a maturity curve for angel investors. In the very, very beginning, angel investors in Brazil, basically, they didn't know how to do it, and it was kind of a personal journey for each one of us. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, my involvement here in Brazil with the ecosystem of investors as well as startups got stronger and deeper, as well as overseas as a result of connecting to several different ecosystems. I started being invited to speak in events, or as well as to become a jury member of awards, or a jury member in the selection process of different accelerators, and also a mentor, which is something that is an amazing opportunity to get to know more entrepreneurs. And I have been doing this since then, internationally and here in Brazil. So to connect all this with the subject for today, which is basically investments, I have prepared a small presentation just to, show you some of the most important aspects of fundraising. Okay, if you don't mind, I would suggest we leave the questions for later, as soon as I finish presenting this. It's a small presentation. And in case you don't want to miss whatever you want to ask, you can either write down at the chat button, and we can come back to it later. Okay? Okay, great. So let's talk about investments. As you have to nurture your future customers, that's the same for investors, basically. If you think about an investment as a decision that someone is going to make or not, in terms of allocating funds into different options of investments, you need to understand that as an entrepreneur, you are responsible for letting me or whoever you are talking to know that you're the best option in town. And the way to do it is basically to create not just like one encounter, one in-person conversation, but to create a funnel in which you're going to be talking to investors, and those who are kind of showing you more interest, you're going to keep talking with them. You're going to keep nurturing them with information about your progress, about your performance, execution, etc. So if you think about a blank piece of paper and you're going to talk to an investor, as soon as you do it, it's like putting a dot in a blank paper. There is nothing there. I can compare you with either your competitors or with other options. Investment decisions, they're normally a process of becoming comfortable and trusting those who are offering you this opportunity, as well as understanding and realizing if they're capable of delivering the execution. It's not going to be like one-time deal. I'm going to meet you in an event and that's it. It's going to be a process, okay? That's just to highlight this, a process. There's this book, a very interesting book, that tries to explain this process in a very detailed manner. If you want to check it out, this is a good reference. I wouldn't say this is exactly the entrepreneur's manual from Steve Blank and Bob Dorf. On the entrepreneur side, this is not exactly as important as on the investor side, but it's a very good book. And it is interesting because as an entrepreneur, you must invest some time to better understand how you're going to build your relationship with capital. And by capital, I mean investors. Not the ones that you're looking for right now, but you should understand that by going for angel investors, this is gonna be a part of your learning curve on fundraising investments from other players later on. So fundraising is just like sales. Basically, you're selling something to someone, and in this particular case, you're selling a piece of your company and your execution and your team and your idea, etc., to someone who's going to buy it. So it is exactly like a sales process. In one hand, when you're going for sales on your startup, you're going to go for funnels, you're going to create a lot of different stages, you're going to nurture them, you're going to talk to them, you're going to show them something, you're going to send them information, and at the end, what you're hoping is basically a conversion. That is exactly the same when you're fundraising. In early stages, more or less 1 out of 40 startups will receive funds. Depending on where you are in the world, this number could be better or worse. It doesn't matter if you, but let's say you don't have the experience. Okay, but it's a sales process. If you can learn the sales process to acquire customers, you can learn the sales process to acquire investors. Of course, there is a huge difference investors will buy a piece of your company, and they're aiming for returns that are multiples instead of percentages. Customers are buying your service or product. So I understand that there are two different things here, but the process to get there is exactly the same. Cold calling or inbound, that depends, because it's also important for you to understand the investors are different. Rodrigo is one kind of an investor. The next guy is going to be perhaps a different kind of an investor. Investors are, you can split investors in different phases, but as well as with different behaviors and different, let's say, risk-taking approach. Sometimes is industry-based, sometimes it's going to be like decided on the profile of the team. Other times will be basically a comparison on cost of opportunities. So I'm seeing your pitch right now, but I'm seeing also 20 other pitches today, and I'm going to decide and go for the one that convinces me more. Sometimes you're pitching an investor, but this particular investor is not making new investments at that particular time. I've been answering a lot of emails lately that are basically requests for pitch opportunities to fundraise with me. And at this very moment, we are answering all of them, basically saying, hey, thank you for contacting us, but at this point, we are pretty much focusing on supporting the startups that we already have. And even though we're still keeping an eye on the market, at this very moment, we are more inclined to direct our resources into the startups that we have already invested in. And the reason being, if we have already put our money there, we don't want them to die. That's it. It's as simple as that. So if you consider that you should create a relationship and you should nurture your investors, not the ones just for today, but the ones for tomorrow as well. And if you understand this is a process, exactly as a sales process, that means you should be cold calling them or using inbound marketing to talk to them frequently until you have an answer like, oh, thank you, but don't call me again. You can keep calling or keep sending messages or keep sending emails. Don't do it on a daily basis, but do it on if you have something interesting to say, on a monthly or a bi-weekly basis. If you don't have anything interesting to say, like you have reached a new milestone or something important happened, you have closed your first customer, your 10th customer, you have reached your break-even point, or you just close with your first angel investor. If you don't have anything relevant to say, don't send messages. But if you do, keep sending them messages. Whatever is the best channel, considering the profile of the investors. And by the way, as entrepreneurs looking for capital, it is your responsibility to have a look on your prospect investors' LinkedIn profile or whatever other information you can find to check if they're interested in your field, if they have done investments before in your field or not, how they normally operate their investment activity. And by trying to scout this, what you can do is to look for startups that were already invested, try to talk to them, ask them about how was the experience of being invested by Rodrigo or by Peter or by whoever. What's the main contribution aside from money they have given you? So don't be ashamed nor afraid of talking to other startups to ask for information. Sometimes they will not give you any, other times they will share with you the experience. But if you're just asking for information, and for example, I am asking for information regarding angel investment, and such startup is already on a Series A, Series B, pitching in a competition. Basically, considering all I have said, you need to have different materials at your disposal to approach investors. The first one is what we call the one-pager. It's a teaser deck. It's a very, very brief presentation of your company. 1 page, that's why we call one pager. If you must, 2 pages tops. Must be something very visual and combined with a very sharp text. If you're gonna write down something, must be very sharp, very precise, and very objective. You can combine with graphics. You can combine with like infographics or graphics or visual information images. Don't try to write everything down because it's very boring. So it must be very visual. This is the tool you use to talk to someone you have never talked before, and you can reach this person by email or by a LinkedIn email or throughout a friend or whoever. It's the first thing you send to someone you haven't talked yet. Because this is to tease me, somehow invite you to pitch me in case I am interested. So whenever we receive these and we have a look, if it's something that interested me or an investor that I know well, I'm gonna either invite this entrepreneur for a pitch or I'm gonna share this document with other investors, either on my angel networking or as well as with clubs, investment clubs, etc. But this is the basic material, and you can use this to implement your first inbound marketing approach, your first stage of communication. Then there is the presentation itself, the pitch deck, which means presenting your startup either on a competition or an event or whenever you're gonna go for investors night or demo day, whatever. This is what you must have. More or less 3 minutes presentation. That doesn't mean 100 slides or 3 slides. The number of slides depends on what you need to communicate and how you're gonna do it. But this is the main support you're gonna have to present in person to someone. Nowadays, we're gonna also be using digital presentations, but this is the one. Must be very, I would say, pragmatic and objective, because you're not going to convince people of investing on your business based on this document. This is just to create the opportunity of have another meeting. The main objective here, the main goal is to schedule a meeting like 8 to 10, 15 minutes meeting in which you're going to move further a little bit more and you're going to explain in more details or then in a 3 minutes pitch what you do, how you do it, why you do it. So still you're teasing investors here to be curious about more details on your business, and then they're gonna invite you for either a meeting, a coffee, or even a Skype call or whatever, very brief, just to be sure that they're also interested in moving forward. And then you must have a meeting deck, which is a much more in-depth deck containing more detailed information, support information, graphics, etc., etc., etc. This is the deck you're gonna present in a meeting in between 8 to 15 minutes, perhaps more. And this one is the one that they're gonna be checking on more details. So important hint: whenever you're presenting your business at this phase, the pitch deck phase, do not focus on the product itself, focus on the business. You should be selling me why your business is worth investing. And by business, I mean the way you make money. And the only way you're gonna make money is if you have understood well a problem, you have built hypothesis of a solution that has some sort of a validation, and customers are already paying for, or they're willing to pay for, if you haven't launched it yet, to access your product or service. So here you're focusing on how well do you understand the market? How well do you understand the problem? Why your team is the best team in town to solve it? How you're organizing your solution up to this point, if it's an MVP or a proof of concept, or if you already have the product or service up and running, then you can kind of show them. Do not focus on details. Oh, I have this button, this button, this button. Focus on the macro stuff, the most important thing you cover. If you have evidence that you do have customers and the number of customers are increasing, show them this, and that's it. Leave some room for questions. Do not try to explain everything in a 3 minutes presentation. The magic will happen when you can use your 3 minutes to create the anxiety on the investors to ask you for something, to ask you for a better or a further explanation, or to ask you about more details. This presentation must be built in order to create curiosity. If I'm curious about either the results you're obtaining or about details on how you're making such results happen, or whatever else, I'm gonna somehow try to talk to you again, either after the presentation, or I'm gonna invite you for coffee, or something is gonna happen. If you present everything there is to say and I don't have any questions, there is no reason I should invite you for coffee, because I already understood, and then I'm capable of deciding right now. So you don't need to decide right now. You need me to ask you to come to talk to me again, so I can understand further what you are doing, why you're doing, how you're doing, the numbers, the results, the validation you have already in place. And so this could increase my eagerness to understand more and more until I'm already deciding on moving forward with the investment. DEX are sales enablement. That's it. If you can, I'm not familiarized with the best example in Czech Republic, but for example, try to have this in mind. Have you ever heard about the sales car, the man who sells cars, used cars? Try to think about this figure. You go to buy an old car in a store, and the guy there will try to convince you that old car is the best car. This guy is trying to listen a yes from you, right? He's trying to sell something that is old, for sure has some sort of a problem, or more than one. It's not brand new. That means the painting must be somehow hurt, the engine is old, etc. But that doesn't mean this guy don't need to put an effort on it. In your case, you're not selling old cars. You're selling opportunities, because unless your company is like selling millions and millions and millions, what you're basically offering an investor is an opportunity in the future. It's not happening right now, it's happening in the future. There is uncertainty as well as a lack of trust. We don't know each other. We need to get to know each other. I need to be convinced that if your business fail, it's not going to be because you haven't done everything within your power to be a success. So it's a process of convincing someone to join you in a journey to create results in the future. That's why your DEX are sales enablement. It's going to be used as a support to state why you're targeting and tackling a specific market, how you're doing it, what's your validation or the evidence that you have proving that you're on the right track, why your team is the best team to pursue such an opportunity, and then you move forward. A few months later, you need to update your DEX with everything you have right now. If you have reached sales, it must be there. How much? What's your growth rate? What's your learning right now? So we as investors, we know that you don't have all the answers. We know that. So if you try to answer everything, like I know everything about this business, it's kind of strange. Unless you have done it before, you should show that you're You've been learning everything you can, and you also want them, the investors, in case they decide to move forward and join you, you want them to help you in learning. You want them to share their know-how, networks, etc. How to connect with investors. So, first of all, as an entrepreneur, your job is to get introduced. And that means either talking to startups that you already know, that have already fundraised the same stage you are trying to. Ask them about their investors when they were fundraising from angel investors, for example. Pitch them. Try to check if they would be willing to introduce you. Of course, you can go cold calling. You can find names on LinkedIn and you should go for them as well, of course. But you can't skip asking people you know, or for example, Seaport guys, they for sure know a lot of investors, but there must be other groups or clubs or entities in Czech Republic or elsewhere you can go to and you can ask them to introduce you. Basically, this is an interesting logic to understand what happens. Investors get pitched more or less 1,000 times per year. So in order to listen to a pitch, we have already chosen those who we want to listen. That means we have received 3,000 pitch decks every year, maybe more. So if we consider an average of 3 meetings per startup, that means basically 9,000 meetings every year, which means 36 meetings for every workday. That is impossible. Understand this. We're gonna be applying filters all over the journey in order to move forward to the next stage or to the next conversation, to the next speech, to the next coffee, based on whatever we can do to filter this number into a more reasonable number. For sure, we probably will make mistakes, for sure. For sure, if you're trying to fundraise and I'm saying no, or I don't schedule a meeting with you, you're gonna feel somehow hurt. But I need to talk to you. Okay, but from my side, I have a lot of things to do as well. So both sides are trying to work their best to get to a place in which they can close deals. It's your responsibility as founders to manage how to navigate towards this very, I would say, windy process of getting meetings. Because from our side, we have to, otherwise we're gonna spend basically each and every workday working as hell in order to find out the best cases to invest in. One of the most important takeaways, knowing / meeting investors is important to increase your chances. If you're like, I'm talking to one investor per month, your chances will be really, really, really small. You need to, if you're on right now fundraising, you need to meet, get to know, get introduced, contact, send an inbound, outbound, email, whatever, to get to know and to get connected to investors, so you can increase your chances. There are things you can do to also try to foster better opportunities, like try to go for investors that are already investing on either your industry or the approach you have or the sort of product service that you're selling, the business model you're applying, etc. Be active in your local startup community, engage with other founders and investors, as well as if someone says that, for example, you're talking to an investor that normally invests on Series A, and you're in the very beginning trying to find your first entry investment, this guy is not going to invest on you. And that's not because you're good or bad, that's because this guy only focuses on Series A, for example. But you can ask them, would you mind introducing me to some to a few angel investors? You can ask them for introductions. You can ask them for, if they are already talking to you, You can ask them for advice. As it says in here, if you want to fundraise, it's your responsibility to be a qualified lead for them. When you're selling your product or service, you do everything you can to find out the most qualified leads in the market, right? That's exactly the same when you're fundraising. You must try to find the best investors for your business. But at the same time, you need to be the best lead. You need to be the business that someone would join forces with you to build the future results, future exits, future growth. That's what you're trying to sell. I try to comprise with this few slides a lot of different information that are sometimes not easy to either to find, or whenever you find, you're sometimes having difficulties to put all these things together. But just to kind of get to an end, feeding the funnel. If this is a funnel and you're working on being the best lead you can, you also need to feed your funnel and work on increasing your opportunities, chances for success. That means you should be going for professional networks, angel groups, pitch competitions, intermediaries. And by intermediaries, that depends on the market you are in, but it could be like sometimes family offices. It could be like sometimes talking to consultants. It could be talking to mentors, talking to those who might have the opportunity to show off your business to someone else. Of course, you can also qualify the way you're going to feed your funnel by finding out the right approach. And sometimes it's going to be talking to mentors or angel groups or going for pitch competitions. Sometimes you can do all of these things. Talking to consultants is not necessarily the best approach, because consultants either want to sell consultancy services, or if they are already selling consulting services to someone and they're either approaching you or you are approaching them because of that, then it could be a very interesting channel. But otherwise, before hiring consultants, you should try everything else you can do other than that. Professional networks, there are plenty of angel investment groups in LinkedIn, angel clubs, etc. You could also go for groups that are somehow focusing on the same subject that you're trying to solve. Professional investors are, all of them or most of them are there at LinkedIn. Pitch competitions, I guess you already have an experience with that in Czech Republic, but you should go for also competitions outside of Czech Republic if you can. Take the opportunity of doing this online, because right now pretty much everybody moved towards a digital approach, which means you don't have to be there in person, which means it's cheaper and sometimes even free to participate. Angel groups, few suggestions, but in that particular case, cold calling them, it's not necessarily the best approach. Try to find out whoever is there as one of the members. Try to find out if you know some of them, or at least one of them. Pitch this person and then ask them to introduce you. That would be much better. In general, angel groups are a multi-step process, because they will have to find out how to accommodate your pitch in a series of pitch events they might have, as well as to find out within the group who are the investors that best fit your business. So I will later on share with Teresa the video of this presentation, so you're gonna have access to it. Don't worry. I guess thank you. In terms of what I prepared to present to you, I know that this is a very huge subject and a very broad subject. So I have prepared myself to also work with you with a Q&A session, so we can go for specific questions. It would be impossible for me to prepare something that would address each one of you situation or particularities that you might have, or questions. So I guess from now on, we can focus on your questions. How about that?
Okay. Thank you, Rodrigo, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
For interesting information, and I'm glad that you can share it with all of guys here and with me. And guys, do you have some specific questions or like questions you prepared, or you just lie on?
Yes, I got 2 questions, but can we go first, or you will start, Darka?
You can go.
Okay, so I get a question that's: have you ever decided about investing in something after teaser deck, or so quickly?
Yeah, I myself,
Yeah.
yes, but that's not the regular behavior. In general, that's not going to happen. And I have done it because we have built, let's say, a thesis, but it's not an investment thesis. It's basically a work thesis in terms of how we understand opportunities. And differently from the majority of all investors I know, we work much more like venture builders. So for us, it is important to work with entrepreneurs from an early stage point of view. We have done investments after just seeing, of course, when I say we have done, I meant we have decided to move forward in talking to an entrepreneur about an investment right after seeing the teaser. But in general, the teaser is done just to call my attention, so I'll be more inclined to accept an invitation for a coffee or for a Skype call or something. So you're gonna have the opportunity to present. Okay. Yeah, but I have done it before. For example, one of our startups right now, it's basically focusing on the pet industry. And after seeing one email with a teaser, I decided to invite this entrepreneur in. And the very reason is basically he's only is like a one guy show. He has no team whatsoever. He built an app that is being used in 144 countries right now. And when we decided to invest in, it was more or less around 100 countries without spending one dime in marketing. So that doesn't happen every day, right?
Okay, thank you. And I get a second question. That's what do you say about this situation about coronavirus? Is it opportunity or disaster for investors?
Let me say this. I have heard from a lot of different investors that this is a disaster. I myself and some of the investors that I know, friends, we see this as a huge opportunity. First of all, because it's going to force a lot of changes. And whenever we have an economic situation that is forcing changes, that means the environment for changing a service provider or a solution from A to B is going to be better, and it's going to be easier. People will be more inclined to change because they have to, right? So having said that, that will also depends on what you are doing. There will be startups dying out of this crisis, not just because of the lack of funds, but also because the lack of a real business. I can tell you by experience, there are a lot of startups being created out of either like, and I'm not criticizing the events per se, I'm just saying that if you're creating startups on a hackathon or a startup weekend, unless it's really done it properly, unless as soon as the event finishes, you kept moving forward by, you know, going in depth in terms of understanding the problem, validating, etc., 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 it's going to be a very superficial approach of solving a problem. Most of the time, it's like either copycatting something without having the knowledge to build it, or at least to build in the same way that your competition that is out there have already learned. So I guess one of the effects will be, you know, killing not just startups, but even business, real business from the old economy that were not prepared to go into the digital era. And by digital era, I don't mean you need to have all your business being done digitally. I mean knowing how to build a business or how to handle your business within this new environment. And also changing and transforming your business the way it used to be towards the way it must be from now on, so you can keep being relevant to your customer. So I see this as a huge opportunity. There are industries that are disappearing right now, and this disappearance is creating a vacuum that offers opportunities for not just startups, also for companies that are already established in the market to create new solutions or to capture customers by offering something else.
Do you guys have more questions?
As you spoke about the opportunities, if you could mention some more concrete example.
Oh yes, for sure. For example, I'm not sure if you're kind of reading about it, but in general, all the old-fashioned companies that are much more based on, let's say, an old approach on how to use technology, they've been forced to move towards a business transformation process. That means also including not just changing the business itself, but also adopting technologies. So artificial intelligence will keep growing a lot. Solutions focused on the health industry, focusing either on patients or on the institutions or the professionals, or combining those things, as well as hardware focused on health. Another example, the education in the world right now is being done digitally through the internet. But right before this crisis, the majority of the university level education was done in person. Even though we have e-learning programs provided by different universities in the world, perhaps the majority of them have something that used to be online, or either like pre-recorded stuff or real-time stuff. Right now, they're moving towards whatever platform they can to deliver classes online. All of them. That raises a lot of questions. For example, infrastructure, buildings, renting buildings. That the same applies for companies. For example, my entire company is working from home. That means I just ended my renting contract, and I free myself for having an office. Can you imagine companies that rent floors, 1, 2, 10 floors, and now they have the majority of those people working from home, and they're having to, because it's not optional. They've been forced to adapt. As soon as they are adapted to it, they're gonna ask the same questions. Why should I keep renting floors, or at least the same number of floors that I used to? I don't need to have all these people here at the same time, perhaps. Perhaps I can be better off if I have people working from home. So either things like very specific, like these examples, or industries like, for example, tourism, events, in-person events, large events. They moved to the internet, or they are canceling the events and trying to, they're hoping they will be able to organize such events next semester or next year. But the industry was changed forever, because now all those people who just dislike going in a digital event, they have been forced to attend digital events. In 3 months' time, 2 months' time, 4 weeks, they will be accustomed to do it. It's not exactly the same, but it's gonna be the new normal, and so on and so forth.
So my question is, what do you think is the 5 most important skills for successful startup? I mean, like personality or skills for successful startup?
First and foremost important is team, and by team I mean team building, because it's something that you do each and every day over time, right? And even if you start with a group of people right now, you're gonna be different people over time. You're gonna learn more things, you're gonna develop your skills, etc. So team building and team management, because this is the singular aspect you can have when you're a startup or your company. There is nothing else singular. Everything else could be bought, or could be paid for, could be acquired, could be hired, etc. Other than people. So your guys are the only singular aspect you have in your company. So learning how to build up this team and to manage this team into the future, being capable of developing the business, growing the business, this is the most important skill a founder or a group of founders must develop. If you're not like, oh, but hey, Rodrigo, let's say we are engineers, we're not really about people, we love technology. If we could, we would get rid of all people. If you think like this, just remember, if you want to sell something, there must be someone there to buy it, right? So it's always someone building and delivering something to somebody else. You will always have people, at least within your company, even if you have a small group of people, and you're gonna be selling to people, right? So aside from this one, I would say, if you want to succeed in business, independently of if it's your first startup or second, or you're gonna perhaps achieve success on the 3rd time or 5th time, but if you want to reach success, you must decide in the very, very beginning who you are, what's important for you, what's success for you as a person, as a founder, as a group of founders, and as a company. Because from this, you're gonna have your values, your corporate values that must reinforce your personal values. Success will be success provided that you can reach the destination as yourself. If you need to change completely who you are, I'm not sure you're going to be able to call this success later on. Mature is normal, but changing your values, unless you recognize you choose wrongly in the beginning, it's very dangerous. You shouldn't be adapting your values in order to, for example, fundraise. If your investors are asking you to become different people, to do things that you don't believe in, they're the wrong investors. And this is the third thing. As a founder or a group of founders, as owners, you are the ones responsible for choosing. You are the ones choosing the mentors you have. You are the ones choosing the investors you're going to have. You are the ones choosing the deals you're going to close. You are the ones choosing the customers you are focusing on. So if you want to achieve success, this choosing aspect must be done carefully. Sometimes it's better to go for a different investor. You should make sure you are aligned, because like a long-standing relationship, if let's say you get married, both of you are going to be thinking about the same thing, right? You want to get old together and die together. That's normally the goal, and both sides have the same goal. When you go for an investment, both sides won't have the same goal exactly. Our goals are gonna be aligned for a while, but remember, investors want to exit, and you want your business to exist forever, perhaps. Or even if you sell the business in a later stage, you're still thinking that you're selling because of whatever reason, but you're still hoping that your business or service will be out there forever, right? Two different things. So even though there's analogy of, when you close an investment round, you're gonna be marrying the investors. In up to a certain extent, that's true, but it's not true for everything. Be aware that your goals and the investors' goals are different in that particular aspect. Investors want to get out later on with profits. You want to create something that will be there forever, or at least while it's relevant, right? So you are looking for a completely different thing than the investors. Of course, as founders, you also want the let's say the money results. You also want to have the financial results, to increase your own network, to become perhaps rich, and there is nothing wrong with that. But for you, normally, successful founders are the ones that the business comes first, but not the business per se, but the realization of the dream comes first, and the money comes second. For investors, the exit with profits comes first, and there's nothing else. Sometimes you build a relationship in which the investors become friends or more friendly towards you, and they will also attribute some value to reaching the dream. But if you reach the dream without creating profits, that's a huge problem for them. Another important thing is, as I said, preserve your values, understand the differences that you have in different stakeholders, like investors and founders. The first one, your team, your people, they are the ones that you can't replace with exactly the same. Whenever you replace someone, it's going to change. The outcome is going to be different. Could be better, could be worse, but it's never the same. And the other two aspects I would say is basically the fourth thing, the values, your values. You must preserve your values over time and over the journey. And the last thing is, if you want something to be successful, you must be really solving a problem for someone. Selling things or services that are just superficially developed or do not solve the problem that somebody has, it's going to give you, it's going to give you some sort of a headache later on, because it's worth paying for solutions that actually transform my life into a better life, because I'm not going to suffer from a problem that I used to have. Even if I'm a B2B business or a B2C business, you must be really, really adding value to your customer. That's it.
Rodrigo, my last question. What was your biggest fuck up in business and why?
That's an awesome question. Wow.
Thank you.
So, my biggest fuck up, I would say that my first 1 year as an angel investor was a fuck up, the entire year. I spent basically $150,000 US in 3 different businesses that went wrong for three different reasons, and all of them could have a different result, and I kind of let them pass because I was so hungry, so anxious to start moving forward as an investor, that I kind of, I chose things in a way that I wouldn't do anymore as an investor. But it was like a very expensive MBA in angel investing, but with a practical approach. I actually lost the money. So I've learned a lot, but that's by far my biggest fuck up over the last 10 years, as at least considering this career as an angel investor. I would say that as a business person, perhaps my biggest fuck up over the last 10 years was not realizing in the very, very beginning that I should have shared my learnings. I lost pretty much 5 years learning alone and not helping others to learn from my own mistakes.
Okay, thank you.
I think my last question is, how do you validate ideas? How, I don't know, like what takes your attention? Like, you first see the person or see the infographic the person give you, and what is the like the point of the success for the startup?
Mm-hmm. Well, after a while, by receiving teasers and decks and watching pitches, you start getting more and more experience. That doesn't mean you won't make any mistakes. The only thing that means is that you're gonna be separating things faster. So, for example, I have watched hundreds and hundreds of pitches for pretty much everything. So if you ask me about health, whatever aspect, probably I have seen pitches for almost, not everything, but almost everything, or a lot of subjects within health, within fintechs, within education, within energy, within other things. So it is kind of easy for us to spot that when someone is presenting a subject very superficially. So whenever I spot this is a no-go, no talk, no coffee, no nothing. Doesn't matter if you are in the very, very, very beginning, but what matters is if you're presenting your business, you're telling me how far have you gone from zero. Mm-hmm. So if you say, oh, I'm a early stage startup that are trying to figure out a problem, I'm gonna assess whatever you're gonna say within this range. I would say one of the biggest mistakes I normally encounter is basically this: people trying to present something that they haven't already understood well. If you tell in the very beginning, for example, I am an early stage startup trying to understand the problem. So far, that's what I have learned. That's easy for me to understand that. First of all, you know where you are, which is awesome. And you are not afraid or neither trying to, disguise this. There is nothing wrong and nothing to be ashamed when you recognize that you are just learning. Zero problem. I have invested in entrepreneurs like this in this phase. Another thing is actually knowing how to position where you are is very important. Then goes to what you know and what you don't know. Whenever you don't know, don't try to trick me, because chances are that I know the answers for the questions that I'm asking, or at least I know a lot of answers, possible answers. So if you say something that doesn't make any sense, unless you really have data to prove it, it's gonna show me that, well, perhaps this person doesn't know, and instead of telling me this, they try to trick me into an answer, and that's it. So it's much more like you listen and you try to find means of excluding cases instead of including. The ones that are there after the process are the ones that are better.
And I almost forgot the important question. Would you invest in international startup? I mean, is there the possibility to invest, for example, in Czech startup? If you would.
Well, we have so far 15 startups from abroad, and that includes MENA region, Europe, US, and Latam. So
Okay.
yes, we already invest in international startups. The startups that we invest in, that they are already passing through our program. We do two different things. We have let's say a venture building program in which we work with the startups. Our entire team work with them to help them to create the business and to launch the business, and also to prepare them to go for investments, including, depending on where they are, the internationalization process. For example, if they want to move to US, or if they are from US and they want to move to Europe, let's say. We have this, and we also have investments, which means then we don't work with the startups. We just we try to find out those who are interesting opportunities for us to invest in, and we co-invest with others.
Mhm.
We do both things in a different way.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're
So
welcome.
that's it.
No, I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you again. It was, as I said before, an awesome trip to Czech Republic. Awesome people. I had a very blessed experience there. You know, if I might be able to help you, just let me know. I would be thrilled to somehow support your initiatives in there, as it's just a matter of finding how, but it was a pleasure to talk to you again.
Okay, thank you, and
You're
have
welcome.
a great day.
You too, guys.